Many boardrooms have lost a lot of sleep because of price points in India. Because in India, in many of the FMCG categories, have not exited that 10 rupee category for the last 20 years. In the FMCG world, we call this low unit price packs. Having that price point removes the barrier for trial. What a large part of the sales of very large FMCG companies are almost 30-40% driven by 5 and 10 rupee packs. Change becomes a huge issue. And with the denominations that we have, the 1 rupee, 2 rupee coin, the 5 rupee, the 10 rupee, trade prefers to keep those price points. A lot of the small candy and sweet sales have gone down because change is not an issue anymore. Hello and welcome to the I'm Blown podcast. This is a podcast which my co-host Siddharth and I put together, looking at some crazy, mind-blowing facts about the Indian marketing business and consumers in India. Today, we're going to be talking about something very exciting, very interesting, though a little sometimes boring. We're talking about pricing today. Magic prices in India. A lot of the FMCG products are priced at these really specific price points, like a 10 rupee price point. And we went down the rabbit hole and we tried to figure out why is it that some price points are so special in India. Many boardrooms have lost a lot of sleep because of price points in India. I can tell you, I've been in many meetings and heated debates about retaining a price point like a 5 or a 10. And with inflation going up, the one thing most boardrooms don't want to do is to exit that price point. It is a really painful decision because in India, in many of the FMCG categories, some in food, but many in personal care, have not exited that 10 rupee categories for the last 20 years. That means for the last 20 years, you've had that same product at 10 rupees, whereas some of the larger products have obviously increased prices with inflation. This 10 rupees has been a real disaster to many marketing professionals like me. And I really want to get into it as to why we've lost a lot of sleep on that price point. And the impact very often, Sid, is well beyond simply marketing. Product formulation, packaging sizes, even things like obviously volume of product has across categories, whether it's biscuits, whether it's toothpaste, tea, all FMCG categories get impacted by this because everybody just wants to hang on to that 10 rupee price point for eternity. So let me ground this conversation. In the FMCG world, we call this low unit price packs, right? And the typical low unit price pack or the price points that we have in India is a 1 or 2 rupees, which was what led to the shampoo revolution. If you Google it, it's an amazing story. There's the 5 rupee price point. We see a lot of food categories play in the 5 rupee price point. And there is the 10 rupee price point where a lot of food and personal care exist within that price point. These are price points, like I mentioned earlier, brands have not existed. And one of the reasons why they have not existed is because many of these categories are still to be penetrated in some of the rural markets in this country. Some of these categories still have as low a penetration as 50, maybe even 20%. And therefore, having that price point removes the barrier for trial, a 5 and 10. So these consumers who don't necessarily have a high per capita income cannot necessarily afford a 35 or a 40 rupees. They want to try a 5 and 10 rupees. So it does remove the barrier of trial. So they're breaking down their consumption into smaller packages, or is it something more that sometimes they don't want to regularly buy? I mean, is there something else there? That's the second step. The first step is to try the product for the first time. So I've worked in the toothpaste category. In toothpaste, it was about 20 years back, the rural penetration used to be in many markets like Bihar and UP as low as 50-60%. That means there was still 50% of the consumers in rural who have not even tried a toothpaste. So therefore, for toothpaste, it's important to have a price point of 5 and 10, which removes any barrier to trial. Many of these consumers may not be able to afford a 70 or 100 rupee toothpaste, the 300 or the 400 grams. And therefore, it's important to have smaller packs, which allows entry point. So that's, I think, one reason.
The second reason is interesting, what you said, which is to say, listen, there is, with a smaller pack, I'm able to control my monthly expenses. That means that, listen, within the money that I have, I am able to spend only 5 or 10 rupees within these products. Beyond that, I will use an existing substitute. So, for example, in toothpaste, a lot of consumers who have entered the category prefer to buy the 10 rupees, use it for as long as possible, after which they'll move to the substitute like Datun, which is totally free. So these were categories that we saw a lot of infrequent consumption, partly because they didn't want to spend more in a particular month. So yes.
But just to clarify, Siddharth, we're not necessarily just talking about here tier 3 and rural kind of markets. This phenomenon is very true in metros as well. It's a Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore phenomenon as well.
That was an I'm blown moment as well. So we assumed a lot of this 10 rupee and the 5 rupee price points will be driven in much more remote, smaller markets. But even in big markets like Bombay and Delhi, which has in excess of 1.5 crore to 2 crore population, almost 20 to 30% of the business happened with these price points, which is fascinating. Which brings us to point number 2, where people want to sort of control the monthly expenditure, and they don't want to buy large packs and drive wastages in that way.
Yeah, and this only gets further underlined by what is called the down trading phenomenon, which is that a lot of households, as their income increases, do sometimes go into the bigger packs. And as a result, instead of buying a 10 rupee pack maybe 5 times in a month, they'll buy a 50 rupee pack once a month. But the down trading starts happening when there's a certain amount of, for some reason, income control, or times are tough and you have a lesser of an income on a monthly basis. What a lot of households start doing is down trading and go back to the 10 rupee anchor magic price, which actually just further underlines the fact that there's something about this 10 rupee thing which allows for that to be an anchor over a period of time.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think it's again their way of just keeping control, especially in times of where there is no surety of income. The prices tend to go up across other categories. In some categories, they just prefer to buy the 10 rupees and control their sort of monthly budgets.
What was I'm sorry to interrupt you. What was particularly, mind-blowing for me as an I'm blown moment was what a large part of the sales of very large FMCG companies like the Unilevers and like the Colgates of the world are almost 30-40% driven by 5 and 10 rupee packs. I mean, for me, that was incredible. I know that it's there because you see it in the market, but to read about it and, for people to talk about it at that high volume levels was mind-blowing for me.
Yeah, no, it was I've worked in the FMCG category. It's been prevalent for about 15 years, so it's no longer shocking. But what's shocking is that it still remains. Yeah. It still exists, and there are many things that are driving that. Of course, as the country grows, as GDP grows, there's still a large percentage of the population that lives on daily wages. And in an era of daily wages, you can't really spend too much on large packs. You again, when the money comes in, you'll enter the category, and when the money is not there, you'll exit the category. Yeah. And entry and exit is best done when you can buy smaller packs. And these smaller packs are available at these sort of price points.
Yeah. As we were talking off camera earlier, another area is, and a lot of the liquor consumption in India is also driven by one-time buy, consume, and that's it. Yeah. A lot of the lower income people will simply go, buy it, and consume it. And along with that is those little packets of snacks, right? You have the aloo bhujia, haldiram, bikaner wala, whatever. And so a lot of the 10 rupee packs come into play there as well. So that just shows you a mindset where people at a certain income level are used to buying, consuming, rather than buying, storing, and then consuming. That drives it very strongly.
I haven't checked the data, but I'm assuming non-pantry loaded items. And when I mean by non-pantry loaded items, what I essentially mean is something that they don't use on a daily basis. Infrequent snacks, like you said, the haldiram, bhujia. Shampoos in many households, people don't use on a daily basis. They buy it if and when they want it. So if it's an infrequent consumption purchase, which is a one-time use, price points play a big role.
It's almost like an occasion purchase, right?
It's an occasion purchase. And why would I buy a large pack and keep it and store it when I can buy smaller packs, and that will sort of drive the infrequent consumption purchase as well. So my sense is that in these infrequent consumption categories, the percentage of sales coming from these price points is likely to be higher.
I was having a completely different thought, which is a second and a third order impact, which is trash. Because smaller packs will just increase the amount of trash, right? So pollution, and we've seen this in a lot of hill stations when you go and you travel outside big cities. Even in big cities, you find so many of these small packs all over the place. And of course, the number of packs are greater, and smaller packs tend to, fly away a lot more. So that's a second order effect of the smaller packs.
Got it. So we spoke about the consumer side. I'm going to bring an angle of the trade side.
You must. That point was really, really cool.
One aspect of the trade side is the retailer who sells these products. And in most of these categories, consumers will get a little bit of money. They'll come in and they'll buy a toothpaste, they'll buy a shampoo, so on and so forth.
Right.
Change becomes a huge issue. And with the denominations that we have, the 1 rupee, 2 rupee coin, the 5 rupee, the 10 rupee, trade prefers to keep those price points. And it's almost psychological that when something moves to 11, trade is saying, you know what, I don't want that headache, right? So trade, I think, drives a lot of preference for keeping these price points, which essentially ensure that they don't have to give change back.
And in some situations, actually, the retailer will end up losing his margin because the consumer will say, why 11, just take 10. And, so he's going to lose 1 rupee in his margin effectively, which of course, no retailer would like to do. And I wonder, I'm a little bit of a pushback now in terms of the way UPI is growing, even at, I would say, lower to middle income levels. I think UPI will have an impact. Maybe this factor will be a little less important. I wonder.
I hope so. But I don't have data, and it'd be good to see data which sort of warrants that. With the UPI growing, the stocking of these products in these small retailers has become lesser. For that matter, they have expanded their category into more sort of products of greater price points. It'll be good to see that. But at this point in time, from what I'm hearing, the salience of these packs have not necessarily come down dramatically.
Right. Also, you were talking about distribution earlier. I think that was a very interesting point because that has a cascading domino effect over a period of time. Let's talk about that.
We spoke about the retailer, which is the end person who's selling the product. But in many of these rural markets, which are, let's say, in UP, maybe about 150 kilometers from a Lucknow city, which is a big hub, one wonders how these products go from Lucknow to, let's say, a village about 150 kilometers away. And what is an mind-blown moment to me, the assumption was that these companies don't go directly to these villages.
Absolutely.
So what the company does is they supply to a wholesaler, which is an independent middleman sitting in Lucknow.
Right.
And that wholesaler supplies to that village about 150 kilometers away. Now, I'm blown moment when I worked in this category is it's not just one wholesaler. The wholesaler in Lucknow will supply to another wholesaler 30 kilometers away, who'll supply to another wholesaler 30 kilometers away, and you could have 5-6 middlemen before it gets to
Eventually to the retailer there.
Now, put yourself in the middleman's shoes. The person in Lucknow gets a full case lot from the company. That is a proper packed case. The last thing the Lucknow wholesaler wants to do is to remove that pack and sell piece by piece. So what that person prefers to do is to sell case to case to case. And the burden of breaking the case should be left to the last wholesaler supply. So case lots and the price of case lots plays a huge role. And some of the smaller packs have more packs in one case. And some of the
So it's easier to break them down.
It's easier
as we go along.
It's easier to move the case, and over a period of time, because only those case slots move, the disaggregation happens for those products. So it's also an aspect of availability driven because of the nature of the channel.
But it works both ways because the pull is there, the push is there, and they work together, and they've kind of found this solution over a period of time, and it works for everybody involved, including the consumer.
And there's a high correlation. The smaller the pack, the greater the margin in the channel, because you need to service multiple wholesalers. So every wholesaler has to give some margin to that in that sense. So I think some degree of channel, and because of channel, the sheer availability of those price points drives consumption of those price points in that sense.
You know, one of the points I forgot, we were talking about earlier, Sid, about UPI, and straight away an impact has happened apparently in a lot of retailers that a lot of the small candy and sweet sales have gone down because change is not an issue anymore. Because a lot of UPI payments are happening, and as a result, so apparently it has had a serious impact on the Perfettis and the Paris of the world, etc., where candy, that change substitution of candy has gone down, which I thought will have an impact on this 10 rupee pack as well. Because if that is happening, then probably an 11 rupee or a 12 rupee pack could still play the role that a 10 rupee does. So I don't know whether psychologically whether that magic pricing will get affected, but there may be something there.
It might take time. At least I'm bringing back lesser candy home now than I used to, but that's a good point. Great. So let's quickly recap what we learned. The first one is the smaller price points, reduced barrier to trial. So the 5 and the 10 rupee, or for that matter, the shampoo example of the 1 and 2 and how that drove shampoo penetration to almost 90%, or the 5 rupee that drove the cold drink revolution in this country. I think it helps increase penetration, and therefore these price points in many categories where the penetration is still lower is the reason why a lot of brands are holding on to it.
And allows the household to control consumption. Because if it's smaller packs, they can week to week or even day to day kind of decide whether they want to consume or defer consumption to a following time period. So control is a big factor.
Yeah, I can imagine instead of buying a full bottle of Nescafe, you buy the sachet of Nescafe, and as and when you feel you could use it, you do that. So
Or
yes,
for special occasions, you can bring in a smaller pack because guests are coming over and things like that. In smaller households, that has a big factor as well.
occasions that led to the fact that many of the infrequent led categories like a Parle G, which you don't want on a daily basis, but you know, it's almost like in many markets, it's like, you know what, I want to have a quick snack and exit it. So infrequent categories, we see a greater salience of the price points. So that definitely plays a role.
Yeah, absolutely. We were also talking about how change or giving change for a retailer is a big factor, and as a result, people tend to stick to round figure pricing points, and 10 rupee was an important one. So that has an impact, though UPI may be changing that.
Maybe
over
a period.
It'd be good to see that. But definitely retailers, I think, still have a psychological baggage of saying, listen, you know what, let's keep the price point simple so I don't have to deal with change. And it might take some time for that to change.
Especially in smaller towns, in smaller retailers and things like that. There was distribution and marketing and sales related factors which are impacting this, as you brought up.
I think the distribution channel, the fact that it goes through multiple middlemen and case lots and margins play a big role in ensuring that those are some of the price points that are only available in those stores. So even if you wanted a 20 and a 25 or 30,
You may not find it anywhere
you
else.
may not find it in many stores in that sense. So yes, 10 rupee price points or in some cases 5 rupee price points still prevalent in many markets. I don't see that changing too much, but it'll be good to keep an eye with UPI and of course the economy growing. Does that trajectory also sort of change in many ways?
Yeah, so like I said right in the beginning, pricing can be a slightly boring space, but can also be very interesting. And magic price points like 10 rupees and 5 rupees just proves that there's so much going on with the consumer, with the distribution, with consumer mindsets, especially in India. Most consumers don't think alike. Everyone thinks differently. Great to do this episode. Sid and me signing off. We'll be back soon. Please give us your comments and some inputs. And if you can think of an I'm blown moment, we'd love to curiously go find some interesting stuff about it. See you soon.
Awesome. See you guys soon.